All right, Dan. So, Victory Over Vices, new show you're hosting. Tell me a little bit about it. What are we in for?
So, and I talk about it briefly in the introduction in the pilot episode, but um, on the Addiction Help podcast, every week we always talk about how we want to talk about the latest in news, sports, and entertainment as it relates to addiction recovery, mental health, and so you and I had talked about it a bunch in the past, and we decided that we were going to focus just on that sports aspect
Mm-hmm.
because unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, I guess fortunately for us, because we can talk about it. Unfortunately for some of the subjects that we're going to be talking about, addiction and mental health is very prevalent in the sports world.
Like with athletes,
Luckily,
like different like athletes, or does it is it? So when you say that like we're that addiction and mental health issues are prevalent in the sports world, are we saying because I don't know how many people realize that it's a serious thing. Like we've seen some things over time, a couple things that happened at the Olympics, there's some things here and there that come up, but I don't think by and large people realize what that athletes are a place where addiction is common, or at least like compulsive issues, mental health issues. Is that what you've kind of come across?
exactly, and that's why I think it's so important that we're launching this show and
Mm-hmm.
we're doing something to make people more aware of it because the average person may sit down on a Saturday or Sunday and they'll turn on ESPN or Red Zone or watch their favorite football game, but they don't necessarily realize,
Mm-hmm.
or I don't want to say realize, they don't always think about the fact that like these athletes they are watching, they're still people at the end of the day, like you and
Yeah.
I are, or like they are. And
Yeah.
so they still deal with the same, whether it's mental health struggles or family issues going on at home, like in the
Mm-hmm.
same way that you and I may wake up in the morning and we may be dealing with something going on in our own house or something going on in our life that's weighing down on us, and we still have to go to our office and do our job, and that's kind of like in the back of our mind every day.
Sure.
Like these athletes are no different. It's just instead of sitting in the traditional, you know, cubicle or office space
Mm-hmm.
or wherever it is you go to work, their office, quote unquote office, is the field, whether it's the football field, basketball court, baseball, whatever it
Yeah.
may be. And so uh, it's just it. I think it's important that we peel back the layers, so to say, and kind of
Mm-hmm.
remind people that at the end of the day, these athletes are still human beings at the end of the
Mm-hmm.
day. And I think we've come a long way in the last few years. Probably as recently as even 10 years ago, I don't think there would have been any conversations, particularly about the mental health side of things involved
Yeah.
with being a professional athlete. Um, I would say in the last 5 years or so, it's gotten a lot more prevalent. I feel like, Kevin Love was probably the first one when he was still playing for the Cavs
Mm-hmm.
to really come out and be open with it and say to everyone, hey, listen, guys, like if my knee's bothering me or my back's bothering me or I roll an ankle and I can't play tonight, nobody has a problem with that, right? Like you guys are all like, okay, yeah, you're injured, you're hurt, you can't go tonight, rehab and get better. But if my brain is broken,
Yeah.
it's no different than
Yeah.
if my ankle's broken, right? Like your brain is part of the body, and not only that, but your brain is what you need to effectively control the rest of your
Mm-hmm.
body. So if my brain is hurt or my brain is not okay, how is that any different than if my knee's not okay or my ankle's not okay or I hurt my back lifting something up? So, like I said, it's gotten a lot better as of late, but I still think there are so many untold stories. There are
Mm-hmm.
so many topics that need to be discussed that when you and I sat down and tried to figure out what we wanted to do next with this
Yeah.
podcast network, I was like, we need to start talking about sports. And I think we showed that immediately in the pilot episode when we talked about gambling and the behind the scenes with when it comes to athletes even. And I think we're going to do that a lot
Mm-hmm.
in future episodes, especially when we dive into topics that nobody's really talking about, such as, are athletes actually addicted to the sport they play? Do they,
Mm-hmm.
they're, or are they put in precarious situations when they need to take certain substances to get back out there, but those substances come with a risk of addiction to them. So there are so many topics that don't get the attention they deserve, because rightfully so. I mean, for the most part, we want to treat sports as a way to escape reality, but for those that are playing it and those that are in it, that is their reality.
Sure. Yeah, and I mean, it comes to mind. I know that like there's been studies that that over 50% of if I remember correctly, if it was pro football players, at least 50%, if not dramatically more, have reported their opioid use and to get back in a game specifically or before it. I remember there were stories that came out where unnamed players were talking about taking handfuls of Vikes before going out and playing, which is, again, it's hard to realize that, like, that's their job though, and you're right, because it's, if I'm having a bad day, my I can take some PTO or whatever and get better, but if I'm not all there mentally or emotionally, that same issue doesn't happen for athletes. It's like, get back in there, it's get a Toradol shot and get back in, or take some other things. And I think we're seeing, I know we just had like World Mental Health Day, and we're starting to see, I think, the people are being more aware of this, that some of the things we've seen. There was a study, if I remember, let me look it up. It was
really quick too, while you're looking that up too, just doing some of my research, you mentioned that too. Now, granted, this was back in 2014, but a Vice article that was written in 2014 showed that roughly 1 in every 3 elite athletes will develop a substance addiction at one point, like you mentioned, because they're needing to take those medications to get back into things. It's not as prevalent anymore, as we've learned more as a whole, not just in the sports world, but as a community. But, once upon a time, you'd walk into a baseball locker room or baseball clubhouse or a football locker room, and like you would see on Halloween, there would just be giant bowls of pills that you would take, and they would just be popping them like they were candy on Halloween, because that's what you had to do to get back out there. And I think now, as a society, as we learn more about mental health, accept mental health struggles, and look at them in a better light, I think some of these athletes are now starting to realize, especially on the mental health side of things, and saying, hey guys, like, I'm not okay. And it needs to be okay that I'm not okay, because the other option, like you mentioned, is, okay, well, I'm going to start popping pills, and then what happens? So if I need to take a mental health day to prevent something even worse from happening, like, you guys need to be okay with that. And I think more and more people are starting to become more okay with that. Like I said, because as a society, we're learning more about mental health, and we're starting to accept mental health struggles and be okay with it on our own. And so thankfully, we're starting to see that, where people are starting to be more okay with it with their athletes. Still not at the point where we likely should be, but we're getting there.
Yeah, and I think back to, like, I think it was George Kittle on with Theo Vaughn, and they were talking about, you're in a car accident every week, multiple car accidents, essentially playing football. And when you picture it through that lens, and you just picture, like, you got to get ready for the next one. Again, it's so competitive, and it is so hard. You don't want to lose your spot. You don't want to lose the opportunity you have. And sports are a place where, it's not just about, like we've seen the rise of gambling, as it relates to sports, and there's no way that, that is not going to affect a lot of people. But it's like you said, it's people, there has to be, teams are going to have to come up with plans as to how do we stop this before it becomes an issue where a player can't play. And they're going to have to really start investing. And there are teams I know who have invested a lot in psychologists, psychiatrists, on staff therapy. Brandon Marshall, I know, has talked about it before with the New York Jets, with, Brandon being borderline personality disorder. I'm borderline personality disorder. Having that as a resource, and a team understanding that can really be the difference between a player being able to play or having to sit it out. And you've seen
another interesting thing too is, I think that as sports fans in general, as a whole, like, we focus a lot of our time and energy when we get invested in these teams and in these players, in the best of the best players, the Tom Brady's, the Aaron Rodgers of the world. And so we view just, football specific. So we view sports through their prism. Well,
Mm-hmm.
sure. Like Aaron Rodgers this year, not to bring up a sore subject for you, but Aaron Rodgers this year for your Jets, obviously, 3
Mm-hmm.
plays into the season, snaps his Achilles, he's done for the year, although maybe he'll come back. But regardless, even if it took him 3 years to rehab that injury, as soon as he's ready to go again, he's got a guaranteed spot on the Jets roster, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What about the guy who's on special teams, who's the 50th or 51st man on the roster? If he gets hurt tomorrow and he can't play next week, gone, cut.
Completely.
They bring up another guy from the practice squad. If that guy can't go, cut. So, and that's an important thing we need to keep in mind too, is that, sports is more than just an Aaron Rodgers or a LeBron James.
The top tier.
The top of the, already to be a professional athlete, you have to be the top of the top of the top 1%. But then when you look at those guys, those are the 0.0002%. And everyone focuses on them, and rightfully so. They do, because those are the guys making the most money. But you got to understand, and I'm prepping episode 2 right now, just to go behind the scenes and talking about focusing a little more on those fringe athletes. The average NFL football player, their career lasts on average 3 years, 3.3 seasons to be exact.
Mm-hmm.
And most of those guys are not making tens of millions of dollars. Most of those guys are on league minimums, which, I know, and people always come back at me because I say, oh, well, the league minimum is $500,000. Okay, well, I'd love to make $500,000. I'm sure you would, but would you get in a car accident every day for $500,000? Just
for only 3 years, you only get it for 3 years.
And then once your 3 years are up, yes, I understand that you've made $500,000, but that's not enough money to just retire for the rest of your life. You then have to go out into the real world and find a job. Yeah. And your body's broken and your brain is broken. And now you have to figure out, after 20 years of doing nothing but playing football or basketball or baseball, what do I do with my life now? And it is so easy for these guys, if they don't have a good support system, if they're not mentally strong, if they don't have somebody in their corner like a therapist or a family, it's super easy for them to just say, but not just them, like anyone. It's super easy to just say, I'm going to take this pill, or I'm going to have this drink because it's going to make me feel better.
Yeah, totally.
And then next thing you know, I mean, not that that's guaranteed, but once again, we talked about this at length on the Addiction Help podcast. We talked about it at length on the Addiction Help website. Sometimes all it takes is that one thing when you're in a really bad mental spot for the spiraling to start.
Absolutely.
And once it starts, it's really hard to stop.
Yeah. And this is something they're going to have multiple opportunities to start the spiral every week, because they got to get ready for the game. They got to get back in there. And now, by the way, people don't, I also think that, one of the problems that I have with sports betting is not necessarily the betting part, but it's what it does to how we view athletes. Because when I see a player go down, I if he's someone that I love, I feel my heart hurts. However, if I've got $10,000 on that, or I've got $500 on this game, and if this person doesn't do this, they're just commodities to me. It changes how I view people. My willingness to be patient for someone to rehab, to get better, to come back is less, because I have money on the game. It can change how we view players, to view them as something as just kind of like, we'll get back out there. No. I need you to get this for my fantasy team. I need you to make this happen.
You just mentioned fantasy. I say it's beyond just sports betting. I mean, I've done fantasy football. I think this is my 22nd year. I mean,
same.
I would be lying if on a Sunday, if I've got Red Zone on, or I'm flipping through all the games and somebody goes down, if my first inclination isn't, I hope it's okay. My first inclination is he on one of my teams? How long is he coming back in this game? And if not, how many weeks is he going to miss? And then who do I need to go trade for or pick up on the waiver wire in order to replace, and it's unfortunate. And I'm not saying that I feel good about it. It's not something I'm saying I'm proud of, but unfortunately, once again, this is another reason why I want to do this show. Like I said, we have, for so long, have treated athletes as commodities, or I don't want to say our servants, but like, you're there to make my life better. But at the end of the day, just like we are, they are human beings who have a job and they have families and they have problems going on in their home life, or maybe they don't. But I'm just saying, like, anything that regular people in society go through on a daily basis, they also go through those things, but they do it with cameras in their faces
all
24/7.
Yep. Mm-hmm. So I mean, I think I'm really glad you're doing the show. And again, you know, there of course is going to be plenty more coming out about it. Victory over vices. There's more information on addictionhelp.com, on our YouTube channel. And I'm excited to see where you go with this. And glad you're taking it on. I think it's an important issue, and we're grateful that you're carrying the torch on this, because I think that sports is a place where we gotta get deeper and figure out a way to help people that are hurting. It's rife there, and we're excited about it, Dan.
No, I'm super excited too. And just in doing my research for not just creating a pilot, but for lining up some of the next couple episodes that I want to focus on, it made it even more apparent to me that these stories aren't being covered. Or if they are being covered, they're not being covered. I don't want to say properly, because I came from the journalism world. I don't want to ever knock anyone for doing their job, so I don't want to say properly, but they're being covered in a traditional journalistic sense, I guess you could say, but they're not being covered where you're truly peeling back the layers from an addiction sense. And so I think that as with Addiction Help and with your guys' backing and support, I can tell those stories, even if they're stories that have been told. I feel like I can tell them
go deeper
in a different light, because I can tell them from that side, from that addiction specific side of things. And I don't have to worry about, I don't want to say an agenda, but I don't have to worry about following certain journalistic principles or going after the average sports audience. We are doing this for addictionhelp.com, which means we are doing this for the addiction and mental health community. So we can get nitty gritty and get deep in there and really have some uncomfortable conversations at times too, because nothing about addiction and mental health struggles is comfortable. Let's face it.
No,
and sometimes in order to really get the point across, you have to have those uncomfortable conversations. And I'm not only ready to have those uncomfortable conversations, I'm excited to do so, as weird as that may sound, because there's stories that aren't being told, and now I have the chance to tell them.
I love it. I think it's fantastic. We're excited for it. We wanted to talk to you about it. I can't wait to share more in the coming days. And so everyone be on the lookout for Victory Over Vices. addictionhelp.com /shows. I know it's listed on there now. It's on our YouTube channel. And it'll be here. So Dan, we're looking forward to all that you have planned for us and all the stories you're going to be telling. And I appreciate you just taking some time just to explain what this is and why we're doing it.
Absolutely. I'm excited to get going.